Hello, my name is Cadet Warrant Officer Emily Martindale from 2505 Bishop Auckland Squadron in Durham Northumberland Wing, and with me I have
Cadet Corporal Robert Simmons from 70 Squadron, Crofton Colchester, Greater Manchester Wing.
And is it alright? And here today we're with Air Commandant Dawn McCafferty. And is it alright if we're going to be able to ask you a few questions,
Of course,
ma'am?
yeah, absolutely.
Alright.
Firstly, ma'am, how have you found your time since you became Commandant?
Oh, exhilarating and busy, very time demanding, but fantastic fun, I have to say. I've done 9 months now in post and the time has flown by. Learning lots about cadet activity, meeting literally hundreds of people, but great fun so far.
Right. With all of the cutbacks in the Air Cadets, how are you going to protect all of the activities in the ACO?
Well, what we've been asked to do is put together something called the 2020 strategy, which is to try and prioritise what we're going to do with Air Cadets right the way through to 2020 and beyond. So we've done a lot of high-level work in the last 8 months to decide what it is we need to prioritise. And obviously aviation is at the heart of it, so flying and gliding, aviation studies, that sort of thing is what we want to focus our attention on. But also, you're quite right, we've got a decreasing budget and a decreasing defence budget and lower numbers of RAF stations to support us. So we're going to do some studies with the RAF on what we call parenting to see if the RAF can continue to provide us with support for the longer term, and also do a complete review of the cadet syllabus to make sure that it's appropriate and it's relevant and it's what cadets still want to do. So there's a lot of high-level work going on to make sure that actually the Air Cadets can continue to be as good as it is and hopefully get better through to 2020.
What are your key priorities for the Air Cadets to support our parent service, the RAF?
Well, again, coming out of the 2020 strategy, it was definitely to keep the air in Air Cadets. So that was very much core to what we were trying to achieve. And the flying and gliding review that Regional Commandant North actually contributed a lot of time to has ensured that the Chief of the Air Staff and the Air Cadet Council know that that's what's at the heart of the gliding flying experience for cadets. And that without it, there's no point being Air Cadets because air is what it's all about. So that's the top priority. Another major priority is my adult volunteers, because whilst I can have lots of cadets, if I don't have adult volunteers to actually run all the activities and for them to be appropriately qualified and trained and willing to give their time, then again, I don't have an Air Cadet organisation. So my next big priority is to do a review of terms and conditions for the volunteers to make sure that they are well motivated to stay with us and to continue to deliver what is, after all, the vast majority of their time is given for free. So adult volunteers is another big effort. And I think the other priority probably is infrastructure. Is we've got an awful lot of our infrastructure is about 40 years old or more, and some of it's in not very good shape. I've got a very small infrastructure budget, so I need to make that go as far as possible and make sure that where you're meeting, all the huts and the facilities are as safe as possible and obviously as modern as possible so that you get good facilities to work within. So quite a lot of stuff there to try and take us forward to 2020, but we're thinking about all this stuff. We're not just sort of going around glad handing and visiting cadet activities. We're thinking about a long-term strategy.
Right. And do you see a chance of more joint cadet activities with the Army and Sea Cadets?
Very much so, and I think, you know, it's already happening. In fact, I was briefed this morning by your regional commandant that there's joint activity going on at sort of squadron and wing level. And I think really it is the way forward, but rest assured that it's not to be a joint cadet force. I don't want us all in purple uniforms. Very much want to have a light blue, Air Cadet focused cadet experience. But I think it's sensible to work with the Army Cadets and Sea Cadets, particularly to share the experience of their volunteers, and if they've got skilled people that could help us and vice versa, shared facilities. And indeed on the infrastructure front, if we're building new facilities, it doesn't make sense to have individual Army and Sea and Air Cadet facilities, but to build joint facilities. So very much, I think, seeing us working together, but maintaining our independence.
To go on from one of your early answers, ma'am, how can we increase the numbers of cadets and our volunteers in our organisation?
Okay, well, one of the key things we need to do, I think, is to have an adult recruitment campaign so that we can actually let people know out there who want to be volunteers, and there are many thousands of them, just what the Air Cadets can offer as a volunteer experience. And we haven't really had a proper campaign for quite a few years. So I'm in the process of trying to get the funding to allow us to do a campaign. And that's to recruit not just for what you would see as the VRT officers, the commissioned officers, but the senior NCOs, the CIs, civilian committee members, padres and gliding instructors. So the whole sort of spread of volunteers, what we want to try and recruit to. And I think that, if we can get the right numbers of adult volunteers recruited with the right calibre and the training, that will help us grow cadets. I think one of the limiting factors we've got on growing cadets is the size of some of the facilities we've got. So again, whilst we might be asked to grow cadets, there are some squadrons that have got waiting lists that can't take the cadets in, either because they haven't got enough adult volunteers, or often because they can't fit them in the building because of fire regulations, etc. So there are two sort of major challenges there. So I want to have an adult recruiting campaign as my priority.
Okay. If you could change one thing about the organisation, what would it be?
Oh my goodness, that's one to ask. What would I do to change it? I'd have my own fleet of aircraft, so that I could actually control I've got obviously access to the volunteer gliding squadrons, but to actually have a fleet of air experience flights that are actually owned and controlled by me, so I could actually do delivery of gliding from within my organisation and delivery of air experience flying. But that's a dream. Chief of the Air Staff isn't about to give me a Hercules or a TriStar to play with, but I guess, yeah, if I could have my own fleet that I had full control over and I could deliver air experience flying, at my beck and call rather than begging for others to do it for us. That's not to say we don't get a very good service from the air experience flights that support us, but obviously they're also supporting university air squadrons, so to have our own fleet would be cracking.
Where do you see the Cadet organisation 5 or 10 years, Mum?
Well, again, that's where the 2020 strategy sees us. I certainly see it as independent and light blue and hopefully growing. I suspect we might see a reduction of our public funding because that's the way all budgets are going. So I'm hoping to counterbalance that with perhaps some more non-public money, some charitable funding. I'd like to think that we have really gripped the idea of what the volunteers are all about and tried to deliver terms and conditions for them that will make them want to stay with us. And I don't want to expand the cadet experience particularly, I just want to make sure that it's really relevant. So again, reviewing what you cadets experience and making sure it's what teenagers of today actually want to do, because most of us on the volunteer side, unless we've come through as junior cadets now to senior cadets and volunteered, most of us are of a certain age and a certain generation that it's actually quite hard to say and understand what a teenager is about. So I think we need to interact with cadets and say to you, what would you like to be doing in 5 or 10 years' time? I do ask that question of a lot of cadets, and most of them just say more of the same. More flying, more shooting, and more camps. So perhaps that's the answer we should be looking at in 5, 10 years' time. More flying, more camps, and more shooting.
And our last question is, so what has been your highlight of being Commandant?
Let me think. I came out of the regulars after 23 years as a group captain, and I thought that was perhaps the end of my service career, and I was reasonably comfortable that I'd had a good career so far. Putting my uniform back on after 5 years away and actually being promoted as well was a massive achievement for me. To get promoted to Air Commodore and given a command tour and given the Air Cadet organisation to command was probably the highlight of my achievement so far. The rest of it, each day, each weekend, I go out and I meet cadets and volunteers, and each day is just great fun. It's great to get out from the headquarters and see what the cadets are actually experiencing and be able to thank the volunteers, because without the volunteers we wouldn't have, for example, a day like we've had today at Linton, where we've had a major field regional training day, and the number of people here behind the scenes who've made it possible. Cadets are having a great time, doing lots of activities and lots of competitions. Behind the scenes there's hundreds of volunteers who've made it possible. So going around today, seeing the cadets, which is great, but also saying thank you to volunteers. That's a highlight that happens every week.
Right.
Well, thank you for your time, Mum.
Thank you.
Hope you've had a nice day here today.
I have, thanks very much.
And that's all of our questions now.
Great.
So it's goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me.